Well, this is less than ideal, Jim muttered to himself now that he had stopped being sick. Thankfully, the vents and filters in his helmet had stopped him drowning in his own vomit, but that was pretty much the only positive he could think of as the stars pinwheeled in front of his eyes. With a series of sharp movements, grunts, and choice curse words, Jim managed to slow his tumble and orient himself to the local primary star. Unfortunately, there was very little that could be seen of his ship except for a few chunks of debris in an expanding cloud of what used to be breathable air, water, and fuel rapidly dissipating into the vacuum of space. Even more unfortunately, he was quickly drifting away from anything that might be remotely useful. It looked like Jim had pissed off the wrong husband-wife or Xeno equivalent somewhere. He was just grateful they'd set a message to play before the bomb detonated, and so giving him time to get off the ship. However slim his chances were now, they were still better than being blown into a million pieces. With ever more inventive strings of curse words, Jim took inventory of his supplies. Just the multi-tool he had grabbed and hitched to his belt loop on the way out, and the built-in systems of the emergency pressure suit. It wasn't quite the square root of frick all, but it was better than if he had jumped out the airlock naked. Luckily, all emergency pressure suits had magnetic tethers built into them for just this sort of thing. Jim checked the simple graphics on his forearm where the tether was mounted. Anything in range would show with a yellow light to the left of the blue light. Unlocking the safety and activating the powerful laser pointers on the tether, Jim attempted to aim at the most promising chunk of debris, a part of the cockpit. Jim watched for the dots. They flashed across the debris as he steadied his arm. The yellow dot was on the right of the blue dot. "Bugger," mumbled Jim as he scanned for another potential target, the laser beams occasionally passing through clouds of freezing water droplets and causing what he would otherwise have thought of as a rather pretty light show. After another 30 seconds of frantic searching, the dots flashed over another section of the ship. Yellow, then blue. "Bingo! Come to Papa!" he exclaimed as he carefully moved his arm until the dots glowed steadily on his target. Jim gently pressed the trigger and the magnetic grapple shot out, dragging a hair-thin strand of carbon filament almost 1 kilometer long behind it. He kept himself as still as possible, not even breathing for fear he would tug the tether off course. After a tense 30 seconds, Jim started to worry. Had he missed? 45 seconds and Jim glanced at the winch in button, wondering if he should press it. 50 seconds and not even the helmet's air vents could stop the trickle of sweat running down into his eyes. 55 seconds. 60. 65. The spool warning light came on, indicating only 100 m of filament left in the reel. Suddenly the contact light illuminated and Jim almost cried with relief, jabbing his finger down on the control to winch in the reel. Slowly he began to move as the filament pulled taut, drawing him towards whatever part of his ship he managed to latch onto. The tug on his arm reduced as the winch speed matched his forward velocity. Jim chuckled as he thanked whoever had the forethought to limit the winch speed, so whichever unfortunate ended up having to use it didn't splat like a bug against the metaphorical windshield that was their target. After a couple of minutes, Jim's destination came into clear view, part of the warp drive and engineering bay from the look of it. Well, there could be worse places to spend eternity if he didn't get rescued. It wasn't even tumbling too badly or with too much eccentricity. What luck, he quietly ruminated as he plotted his approach, as much as he could plot an unpowered drift with no way of changing direction anyway. Activating the magnetic soles on his boots, as well as the patches on his knees and hands, Jim braced for landing. Oof! The wind was knocked out of his lungs as he smacked into the bulkhead. Even with the magnetic grips, he skidded as his relative momentum threatened to throw him back into space. Jim let out a triumphant "woo" as he came to a reasonably undignified halt against what was once an engineering console and disengaged the magnetic winch, fully retracting it back into its housing. A quick pat-down showed no broken bones, and the readout showed no indications of a suit leak. Steadying himself against the gentle spin, Jim started to explore what was left intact. After an hour or so of searching, the answer was not much. His suit had enough food and water to last him a week. There were several canisters of liquid oxygen, which at least would keep him alive long enough to die of thirst, as the water and recycling systems in his pressure suit ran out and failed in that order, presuming he could find a way of connecting them to the socket on his suit. There was even power from the reactor, although most of the control systems were damaged. As far as he could tell, the hyperdrive was operational, although without any shielding or way of navigating that wasn't a ride he particularly wanted to take. First job was to fabricate something to allow him to recharge his oxygen. Jim set to it, pulling likely tubes, valves, and random bits out of the many damaged or non-functional systems and raiding tool cabinets for ways to fashion an adapter and regulator. After a couple of hours, he was done. Without any way of testing it other than on himself, Jim hooked up the liquid oxygen charge port of his suit to the canister and opened the valves. He felt, rather than heard, the rumble as the liquid started filling his suit's reserves, and the gauge moved until it showed full. Shutting off the valves, Jim smiled. "Looks like I get to breathe another day." Carefully stowing the adapter, Jim turned to the rest of the engineering bay. Thoughts on what he could do. The only communications gear was the short-range radio and emergency beacon on his suit, and that would be no good in this backwater system with pretty much no traffic. The subspace communications were in a part of the ship that had drifted off, who knows where. Assuming it wasn't outright destroyed in the initial explosion or the subsequent tearing apart of his ship, there was no way of flying out of here on hyperdrive, as there was no way of... Jim paused, lips pursed in thought. There is no way of flying out of here, but maybe I don't need to fly. I just need someone to be paying attention. With renewed energy, Jim checked over the warp engine and its links to the reactor. As he suspected it was still operational, these things were built tough. Splicing together the remains of several consoles, Jim hacked together a rudimentary interface to cycle power through the hyperdrive at set intervals, creating a kind of ripple or wake in subspace that hopefully someone would be able to pick up and curious enough to come and check out. Well, at least he hoped that is what he had done, as there was no way to check that the hyperdrive was actually functioning as intended. Without too much else to do, Jim took out a pack of cards he kept in the storage locker next to the remains of the airlock, tethered his suit to a power socket, and settled in to wait. Subspace Monitoring Station Tau Zulu Epsilon. Subspace Technician 2nd Class RV approached the duty officer. "Sir, there is a low power and intermittent subspace disturbance that had been coming from near System 947 G2. I thought it might be a glitch, but this is the third shift I have noticed it, and I have run through all the diagnostics without any fault indicated." The duty officer looked over at RV. "What sort of disturbance?" Ravi lifted 3 of its lower limbs in the equivalent of a shrug. "It almost looks like the profile of a poorly tuned warp engine, but it is stationary. At first, I thought it was random as the signal strength kept on changing, but after monitoring it for some time, it looks like it is coming in a repeating pattern, cycling once every 37.5 minutes. "A repeating pattern?" the duty officer queried, the spines on his head raising with interest. "Show me." The two looked at RV's terminal. You can see it looks like 3 short disturbances, a pause, then 3 longer disturbances twice as long as the first 3, a pause, and then 3 more short disturbances the same as the first 3 before a longer pause, and then the sequence begins again. The duty officer looked back through the data and could see the same pattern going for the last 5 days, as well as the attempts by RV to troubleshoot the system when he first noticed it 3 days ago. I don't know what it is, but if it is someone making it, whether intentional or not, we should probably send someone out to take a look and at the very least get them to stop whatever it is they are doing," the duty officer said to RV as he turned to activate his communicator and alert the patrol captain. Patrol Ship Tau Zulu Epsilon 3, commanded by Patrol Captain Sam. Approaching target coordinates, Patrol Captain. There is still no response on any subspace communications channels. Thank you, pilot. Please exit WAP at standard safe distance and send out the usual full array communications, replied Patrol Captain Sam. The drive hummed as the ship dropped down through subspace and entered real space. Communications away. Sensors registering some debris. The pilot informed Sam. Sam started to thank him when the pilot interrupted. "Patrol Captain, there is a response on one of the radio frequencies. Someone calling himself Jim is telling us to hurry up and rescue him, unless we are another damn hallucination, in which case we are to go away and leave him the feck alone." 3 weeks later, Subspace Monitoring Station Tau Zulu Epsilon. Police incident report. Following rescue of human male Jim, appropriate insurance claims were made and settled for the loss of his ship and cargo. During this time, the human engaged in a romantic partnership with Patrol Captain Sam. The existing brood partner of Patrol Captain Sam took exception to this, and during the chase and eventual flight of the human aboard the passenger freighter Bleef, severe damage was suffered by a number of service kiosks in the promenade, as well as a loss of significant numbers and values of trade goods destroyed during their struggle. Appropriate charges have been filed against both parties. However, seizure of damages payment from the humans' credit accounts could not proceed as the accounts no longer existed by the time the judgment was passed. Local authorities within the cluster have been alerted and provided suitable descriptions.